They explained that everyone must place the paper on the item to be able to remove it, and that it only worked for items on the first 4 floors. Obviously, they could only get one item per slip of paper. As everyone split off into a few different groups, a large one centered around Alistair headed in one direction, and another group of 3, 2 girls and 1 boy, made their way into a side row. Naturally, Kimarya was one of the girls, the other Dara, and the boy, being Liram, cheerfully chatting with Dara. It seemed the two grew up as good friends. Luckily, Liram didn't allow Kimarya to be excluded from their conversation, as he pointed out weapons excitedly and their properties. It seemed like Liram was a weapons fanatic, and Dara as well. Kimarya saw that the floors of the treasury were truly massive, to the point that they never bumped into more people, choosing items as they browsed through. Liram looked over and asked Kimarya, "What kind of weapons are you thinking of choosing?" Kimarya stopped to think. "I've never held a weapon in my life besides a stun gun or a toy at laser tag." Kimarya responded to Liram, asking, "Are there any of those that fire projectiles, like a bow or crossbow?" Liram stopped to think for a second before he was playfully knocked on the head by Dara, who giggled as she said, "Idiot, why are you thinking so long? Of course, there are. A sign up ahead even says projectile weapons." She turned to Kimarya and said, "Come, follow your big sister." Liram quietly followed behind the two, muttering to himself, wondering why she seemed so unfamiliar to something so well known. Kimarya was starting to really like Dara. She learned that Dara is a serious and in-your-face fighter that easily rushes into combat, with a straightforward attitude to match, who also cherishes friendship. Kimarya also learned that her ancestral guardian spirit was the deadly nightmare panther, a great choice that had a very powerful constitution as well as one of the better growth potentials seen today. As Dara led the way, they arrived at the projectile weapon section after a few minutes of walking, where Kimarya saw many weapons like composite bows, short bows, long bows, crossbows, dart blower, and throwing knives. Kimarya was imagining a crossbow, so she browsed through that area till she saw an interesting one that Dara also noticed and said, "That looks pretty strong. Says here that it's called Sinful Tundra, a repeating crossbow." Kimarya walked closer to the crossbow, noticing it was mostly black and some brown, with a rectangular section on the top for the bolts. There were ancient-looking blue runes on the underside. Kimarya decided at once that she had to have this crossbow. She even felt a sort of resonance with it. Kimarya placed one paper over the bow, and after a flash of gray light, the crossbow was free from its invisible constraints, where Kimarya could finally hold it in her hands. She felt a strange power flowing inside of the bow as she held it before putting it away into her bag of holding. Liram was farther back looking at a bow this whole time, but he also paid enough attention to notice that Dara and I looked at him. He said, "This is called Freezing Bow of the Wolves, and it also has 2 elements, ice and wind." After Liram said that, Dara was about to say something, but he quickly put his paper onto the bow, releasing it and putting it away. Dara shook her head before looking back at Kimarya, where she said, "Guess it's my turn. I'd follow the trend and get a bow or whatever, but I'd never use it. Plus, I have bad accuracy." She gave a mischievous smile before saying, "I enjoy being up close where the sweat and blood dance, where I can look my enemy in the eye, right before stomping them into the ground. Heh heh heh." She once again led the way, till they saw short swords, long swords, scimitars, maces, bludgeons, and mauls. Dara stopped and reached toward a large, half-wooden, half-metal bludgeon before muttering, "This is perfect." Kimarya thought she could even see stars in her eyes. She could only chuckle and walk closer and clearly see its name. "Haughty thunder bludgeon of the tiger, a weapon of 2 elements, metal and electricity. It had incredible hardness and weight from the metal elemental aspect and extreme speed of electricity." No wonder Dara was so excited. It was an incredible and oppressive combination for combat that rightfully earned the tiger in its name. Dara quickly pressed her paper slip to the top of it to release and claim ownership of this incredible weapon. Kimarya felt there was already a good connection within their small group, so she felt it was her turn to get a second weapon, or item. Apparently, it was something everyone else implicitly understood by the expectant looks both Dara and Liram had when looking at her.